A few days ago, I was watching Lex Fridman's interview with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. Now, going into the interview, I thought I already understood NVIDIA's story. They're the company that makes GPS. AI became a huge deal. Their chips happened to be perfect for training AI models. And because of that, NVIDIA became one of the most valuable companies in the world. Simple. Or at least that's what I thought. But somewhere in the middle of the interview, Jensen said something that completely changed how I think about NVIDIA. And once you hear it, you'll realize that most people are looking at this company the wrong way, because NVIDIA isn't trying to be the best chip company anymore. In fact, I don't even think NVIDIA sees itself as a chip company anymore. I think NVIDIA is trying to become something much bigger, and honestly, that's both impressive and a little terrifying. This is where Jensen talks about how NVIDIA's view of computing changed over time. He explains that the unit of computing used to be a GPU. Then it became an entire computer. Then a cluster. And now, according to him, it's an entire AI factory. When I heard that, I immediately paused the podcast because that's not a normal thing to say. Most CEOs talk about products. Most CEOs talk about customers. Most CEOs talk about market share. But Jensen was talking about factories. Not factories that make cars. Not factories that make phones. Factories that make intelligence. And that's when I realized that NVIDIA's biggest transformation isn't technological, it's philosophical. The company has completely changed what it believes its product actually is. For years, NVIDIA's mission was straightforward. Build better graphics processors, help gamers get better performance, create faster hardware, and they got incredibly good at it. In fact, they got so good at building GPUs that researchers eventually discovered those same chips were amazing for training artificial intelligence. At the time, that looked like a lucky break. People often tell the story as if NVIDIA accidentally stumbled into the AI revolution. But after listening to Jensen, I don't think that's true. I think NVIDIA recognized something before almost everyone else did. They realized that AI wasn't going to be about a single chip. It was going to be about entire systems. And that's where things get really interesting. Because if AI were only about chips, then competitors could eventually catch up. Maybe another company builds a faster processor. Maybe someone develops a cheaper alternative. Maybe the technology becomes commoditized. That happens in almost every industry. But NVIDIA decided to play a different game. Instead of selling individual pieces, they started building the entire ecosystem. What I mean is they built the entire rack. The chips, the networking, the software, the server architecture, the cooling systems, the rack designs, everything. Think about it this way. Imagine you're building a Formula One car. One company sells you the engine, another sells the tires, another sells the electronics, another sells the software. Now imagine one company builds every single component and optimizes them all together. Which car do you think performs better? That's basically NVIDIA's strategy. And according to Jensen, this approach is called extreme co-design. Instead of treating hardware and software as separate things, NVIDIA designs them together. Every piece is built with every other piece in mind. The result is that competitors aren't just competing against a chip anymore. They're competing against an entire ecosystem. And that's a much harder battle to win. This is where I think the average person starts underestimating NVIDIA. When people hear about AI, they usually focus on companies like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Meta, or xAI. Those are the companies building the AI models. Those are the companies making headlines. Those are the companies launching products. But behind almost all of them is NVIDIA. It's almost like discussing airlines without talking about airports. The airlines get all the attention. But without the infrastructure, nothing happens. And NVIDIA is increasingly becoming that infrastructure, the foundation underneath the entire AI industry. Now, to be fair, Jensen doesn't seem to be hiding this. In fact, he's incredibly open about it. Throughout the interview, he keeps coming back to the same idea. The future isn't individual computers, the future is AI factories, and at first I thought this was just clever marketing. A fancy term designed to make data centers sound exciting. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized what he was actually saying. A traditional factory takes raw materials and turns them into products. Steel becomes cars, wood becomes furniture, cotton becomes clothing. But an AI factory takes electricity, data, and computing power and turns them into intelligence, responses, predictions, decisions, agents, models. In other words, Intelligence itself is becoming something that can be manufactured. And if that sounds crazy, that's because we're living through a technological shift that's genuinely unprecedented. For most of human history, intelligence came from people. Now, companies are spending hundreds of billions of dollars building infrastructure that can generate it at industrial scale. Think about that for a second. We're building factories for intelligence. That sentence would have sounded ridiculous 10 years ago. Today, it's one of the biggest industries on Earth. But here's where the story becomes controversial. Because whenever one company becomes the foundation of an entire industry, people start asking difficult questions. Not because the company did something wrong, but because dependence creates power, and power creates influence. Right now, if you're one of the biggest AI companies in the world, there's a good chance you're heavily dependent on NVIDIA. If you're a startup trying to train advanced models, you're probably relying on NVIDIA. If you're a government investing in AI infrastructure, you're probably looking at NVIDIA. If you're building the next generation of AI products, NVIDIA is somewhere in the stack. That's an incredible position to be in. And honestly, it's hard not to admire what they've accomplished. They spent decades building technology that most people barely paid attention to. Then suddenly the entire world needed exactly what they had spent years perfecting. That's not luck. That's vision. But it also creates a fascinating question. At what point does a company stop being a participant in an industry and start becoming the industry itself? Because that's what makes this interview so interesting. Jensen isn't talking like someone who's trying to sell more GPUs. He's talking like someone who's helping build the infrastructure of a new technological era. And maybe he's right. Maybe AI factories become as important as power plants. Maybe intelligence becomes a manufactured resource. Maybe NVIDIA becomes one of the most important companies of the 21st century. Or maybe this level of dependence eventually creates problems nobody is thinking about yet. I honestly don't know. But after watching this interview, one thing became very clear. The biggest mistake you can make is thinking NVIDIA is just a chip company. That story is outdated. According to Jensen Huang, the GPU was just the beginning. The real goal was never selling chips. The real goal was building the factories that power the AI revolution. And if he's right, then NVIDIA's most important product isn't hardware. It's the future infrastructure of intelligence itself. And that's a much bigger story than most people realize. So let me know what you think. Is NVIDIA simply the most innovative company in tech right now? Or is it quietly becoming so important that the entire AI industry can't function without it? Because after listening to Jensen Huang on Lex Fridman's podcast, I think that's the question we should all be paying attention to. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.